Here we have today's speakers. We want to welcome Carter Shaw, who's the Petroleum Marketing Manager for Maverick. We have Scott Barrett, a Senior Fuel Pricing Manager from the Wills Group, Nick Perry, Director of Fuels for Spinks, and John Keller, the Division Director for Price Advantage. I'm Allison Rowe, I'm the Director of Marketing for Price Advantage, and I will be your moderator today. Now, in all good faith, we do have one disclaimer, and that is that Carter Shaw got a notification over the weekend that he had to go on a site visit with the corporate team today. So we did record Carter's session in conjunction with the team yesterday, so you will hear some interaction with the folks who were on our practice session yesterday. And if you have any follow-up questions regarding his particular topic, which is the leveraging and using of data, feel free to ask me. You can, my email is at the end of the presentation, or you can email me directly at allisonrowe@skylineproducts.com. And that actually pertains to all of the speakers today. If you have something following up from this webinar and you would like some more clarification, feel free to email me directly and I will contact one of the speakers. What is in it for you? Why are you here? Do you want to spend an hour out of your day? So, gleaming from the conversations and the practice sessions that this whole team has, here are a few things in a nutshell that we want to talk about. As all of you know, volumes are down right now and margins are king. One of our experts blatantly said, you can't go chasing for phantom volumes. If the volumes aren't there, you've got to modify your strategy. And right now, that is in margins. This webinar talks about how to maximize your margins, and a lot of it has to do with improving the speed of which you price fuel, the way you leverage data. So it's best practices around how to price fuel. This is not about telling you what price to price fuel, because that obviously isn't appropriate. But we're recommending best practices on how you can improve your margins and work with your customers to gain some actionable insights. We've got the ROI of reducing manual processes. Carter mentions humanizing data for actionable insights, which is really important. During our practice session, there was one instance where one of our experts watched a competitor near his location price his fuel 13 cents below what he was running his fuel at. And through leveraging his data and looking into it, he realized he didn't need to chase that because his customers were sticking with him. Because we all know that there are certain attributes, certain things going on at your store that gives you a competitive advantage over someone in the market. And all those subtleties with your fuel locations, you need to sort of play your position. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Overall, we're talking about data, how you aggregate, how you leverage data, what you can do with it, determining new prices, and the delivery of new prices. So with that said, we will go into Maverick. And as I mentioned earlier, Maverick's presentation, Carter's presentation, does happen to be pre-recorded because he got called out today to do some site visits. But I think you'll enjoy what he has to say. There is some interaction in here from the panel that we worked with. And if you have any questions, just raise your hand and we'll address those after we watch his recorded presentation.
Hi, Carter. Tell us a little bit about your story there at Maverick.
I came to Maverick 5 years ago from Chrysler out in Detroit. I was in their corporate finance division, and an opportunity presented itself, and I was able to come here and start at Maverick. I've been here the last 5 years. My team is made up of 3 people. So I have my director, who I report to, and then there's 2 of us who handle the pricing and the all the reporting on a day-to-day basis. And so really we have a very lean team, and that's mainly been able to keep it lean because of Price Advantage.
Since you've started, how much have you grown? Because I know that you guys have a very aggressive corporate strategy of growth.
So we started with about a little over 250 stores when I first started in 2015, and we'll be almost at 360 stores by the end of this year, and hopefully by the end of next year nearing 400. And our pricing team has actually stayed the same size during that whole time. We've been able to reduce the amount of time we spend on pricing during that time as well, with the implementation of Price Advantage and some other technology.
Perfect. Well, that's a great segue into exactly what this particular slide talks about. So we want to share best practices with everyone who is on the webinar today. Many of those best practices, or actually most of them, are talking about improving your speed for delivery, access to data, analyzing data. It's going from, the data to the determination to the delivery of the end-to-end pricing ecosystem. We've got some things listed on the left. Will you tell us just a little bit about what data sources you use, where they're coming from, how you leverage them, this whole full cycle as far as how you leverage and use data?
So most of our data imports are PDI data imports, and we do imports on sometimes multiple times an hour, depending on the type of data that's going in, to sometimes just once a day. But all of those elements on the left-hand side, we have going in at least once a day, and in most cases hourly or multiple times an hour. If you have data available, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to make timely and accurate decisions. Really, the only bottleneck should be the time it takes you to look at and understand the data. The bottleneck should not be getting the data into the system in the way you want to see it. Prior to using Price Advantage or implementing Price Advantage here at Maverick, that was our bottleneck. Right now, the data coming into the system and aggregating it in the way that we want to see it and analyze it, that's no longer the bottleneck, which is fantastic. It allows us to make really timely decisions and achieve the best outcome on a store-by-store and a company-wide basis.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what's on the right-hand side of this?
Sure. So one of the big things for us is being able to extract the data from Price Advantage and the Price Advantage database, and then build customizable reports and analyses to better understand our data, which really is understanding how your store behaves, how customers behave, how all the different factors are impacting your stores and your customer. But that's really key for us in being able to understand the data, understand what's happening to our business, and then allowing us to really quickly make actionable decisions to improve the operation or address a need in the operation.
And you're analyzing everything from fuel cells as a standalone category, as well as other categories, the correlations to in-store sales. You're going very deep in all of those areas. Is that correct?
Correct. We're performing a number of regression analyses, other types of statistical analyses, machine learning, other machine learning methods, clustering analyses. We've even done some deep learning black box analyses on the data. But the key is being able to have the data in a way that you can actually do those. Any person who spends a lot of time analyzing and studying data knows that 90% of the time is cleaning up the data and organizing it in the way that you can actually start to analyze it. But one of the great things about the way the Price Advantage data is organized is that really cuts down on the amount of time needed to do that. So you can actually spend more time building a statistical or operational model and then analyzing the data.
Carter, if I can I ask you a question? You said you were importing your inside daily sales. Do you see an impact if with your retail and driving inside sales, because I am constantly having to defend, especially in an up market on trading, if I'm being sticky and holding on to margin. Do you see that impact to your inside sales if you move a retail? And how do you validate or track it, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question. My answer is it depends. It really depends on the store. That's why having the ability to import the data is so important, so you can make that determination. So we initially had it where we were just importing like a total store sales on a daily basis. And when I started doing the analysis to see how my pricing impacted those sales, I wasn't gleaning a lot of insights. And so I made the determination that I needed to go a little bit more granular into more of a category specific level. And that's one thing that's great about Price Advantage is you can modify the data import to match what you need. And so we started getting the data on a more granular level. And then I was able to build some reports through querying the database now that the data was kind of going in the way that I wanted. And I found that for some stores, our retail price really didn't impact the in-store sales, but for other stores, it was significantly impactful. And that's what's great is it helped me to determine which stores I needed to be more sensitive at and which stores I didn't need to be as sensitive at. And I had the data and the analysis that I was able to build to back that up.
Knowledge is power. No, I concur. I agree. Interesting. Thank you, Carter.
No problem.
Carter, do you have an estimate as to how much time your team has saved by getting rid of those spreadsheets that you mentioned?
I would estimate just on my own, it's reduced the amount of time I spend on just pricing stores by upwards of 50 to 70% each day. And so I'm actually able to spend more time on other projects, other analyses to help improve my pricing decisions. Really, I would say that the big savings is having to not hire additional headcount to handle our store growth. Maverick's growing, between 20 and 30 stores a year, and where other areas in the organization to support that growth have to hire new people. We just simply haven't had to on the pricing side. We've been able to scale that growth with Price Advantage. And so that's been the big saving for us is being able to keep a lean pricing team to just a couple of people.
Okay.
If I could interject here too, Carter, a savings that we have by having this data available to us, we did an analysis on competitor surveys, and we eliminated that because we were feeding in the Opus Radius reports that one of two things were happening. They were pencil whipping the survey, putting in a false survey, or they were putting the correct survey in, but I already had that information on the Opus Radius report. So on average, we sample surveyed our store managers. Some were having to leave their house 15, 20 minutes earlier to go grab that survey, key it into Price Advantage for us to use. Now it's giving them 15 to 20 minutes inside the store to get ready for morning time, drop time business. That is huge in getting your store ready for the morning time.
I agree. We've seen the same benefit as well.
What we'd like to do is let John Keller show a few screenshots that represent what he was talking about. So he was talking about aggregating that data, consolidating it, and how you view that data to make pricing decisions more quickly. So like when Nick mentioned, walking away from those spreadsheets or competitor surveys, whatever it might be, the manual process, there is a way to automate that, which in turn helps you price fuel faster, which makes you more agile and makes you respond and protect your margins more quickly. So with that, we're going to have John do a few screenshots.
Thanks, Allison. Carter talked about aggregating information from various sources of the business, displaying them in one view, helping you to leverage all that information quickly to make decisions and then deliver those new prices out to various aspects of the business. This is the all stores view where everyone starts. It's showing information for every individual location. Each location is a row here. I've got my address and my city, my current price, whether my surveys are current or late, what's my current weighted actual margin, what's my actual cost, that's the in-ground cost, what's the total volume for all grades for each location according to the most recent sales, my most recent gross profit, and my lat and longe values here as well. Let's double click on store 120 and drill down. Here I'm seeing pink and green according to above or below my targets, or to my month to date versus last year, or to the 6-week average, or the 7-day average versus last year. Here I'm seeing my replacement margin, my weighted actual margin, and then I've got my competitor prices, both for my employee surveys as well as my OPUS radius reports that I'm importing. The 0.5, 0.7, 0.2, 1.1, that all reflects the distance between the competitor and the store. So here's my competitor price going down for each survey source. Then I'm also able to see how long ago did that survey price change. So in this case, according to the employee, this competitor changed 2 hours ago. But according to OPUS, they changed 8 days ago. I can also see in this column the last move. So this says 2 hours ago, this competitor went down a penny, and this says 8 days ago, this competitor went up a dime. Now I've also got a dashboard that's configurable according to each person's preference. And here I'm showing 4 different analysis views. Here I'm showing the volume and price and the volume analysis on the top. In both cases, the blue bars reflects volume. Here I'm showing volume according to the last 7 days with the target, my street price for my store, and the price for each one of my competitors, and then my replacement cost in black. With this one, I'm seeing the blue bars, and I'm showing it for the last 30 days, and I'm showing my margin and my gross profit as well. That's the green and the purple. I'm also showing the red trend line, which is the same day of week gallons for last year. So I can compare my gallons this year in the blue bar to my gallons last year, same day of week. Here I'm showing weighted actual margin, weighted actual cost for the last 7 days. And then I've got a combination of volumes and margins across all my grades, 6-week average, month-to-date average, year-to-date average, and then my daily margins as well as for each individual grade.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate that. We are now going to move on to our next presenter. Scott Barrett is with the Wills Group. Scott has lots of industry experience. He's been in it for many years. He was involved with BP. He's worked as a consultant, and now he is working with the Wills Group, which is a regional fuel marketer with nearly 300 stores throughout Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware. Some are branded, and some are privately branded, and some are national brand. So, Scott, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move into your slide regarding strategies.
Thanks, Allison. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I apologize. I turned my camera on. I'm on vacation this week in Florida, but I came off vacation temporarily to help out Allison and John. So if there's background noise, my apologies for that. I will. I'll start off by saying I've been with the Wills Group now for going on 8 months. As Allison pointed out, we are a Mid-Atlantic marketer, primarily operating in Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia. Got almost 300 stores operating under brands like Dash In, Shell, Exxon, Marathon, Citgo, and Jiffy Mart locations. I'd say that we are one of the leading marketers in the Mid-Atlantic, no doubt about it. I do want to talk to you about price determination today, or what some would call strategy. And if you get nothing else from my discussion today, I want you to take away 3 key points. So get your pens out. First point is pricing takes a village. If we're operating our pricing function in a vacuum outside of everyone else in the organization, we're doing a disservice to our company. We're likely not making the best decisions or the best strategies out there. So remember that pricing takes a village. My second point I want to get across today is know your strengths and weaknesses versus your competition. I'm going to talk more about that. And then the third point I want to make today is about using your data to tell the story. And you heard Carter talk a little bit about how they use data. But all of this falls under the guise of what part of pricing is art and what part of pricing is science. And there are elements of both. You need to have both the art and the science working properly in order to really maximize those 3 points that I just brought up. In the area of pricing takes a village, you've all heard the cliche that teamwork makes the dream work, but there's a lot of truth to that when it comes to pricing. I'll give you an example at the Wills Group. If I look across my operations team, all of my area managers, and I sum total the years of experience that they have, it comes to 225 years of industry experience. And that's not to say that all my area managers are old. It's just to say that when you start adding together everybody's experience across dozens of different companies that they've worked for in the industry, there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of experience in that team, and we need to capitalize on that experience. I'm constantly amazed. My area managers come to me and they bring up ideas about what's going to happen if we price a certain position versus this competitor. How will that competitor react? Or this store over here is more likely to get gallons if we get aggressive. Or this store over here we can margin up and not have an impact on fuel volume. I'd like to take advantage of that information as much as possible. I do that through market rides. And you heard Carter today getting pulled out for riding some sites. I try to get out into my markets every week. With everything else we have going on, it works out to be more like 2 or 3 times a month. And I get out and I do these market rides, a lot of times with the area managers, with your field folks, and sometimes you go out without them because you're trying to get that information, you're trying to share that knowledge and gain knowledge from the folks that are in the field every day. It's an important component of how you're going to operate collaboratively across the organization. I also recommend meet regularly with your operations team, discuss strategies, talk about problem sites, look at what it is that's driving performance in a certain area. I meet with my team weekly and have one-on-one discussions at least bi-weekly with everybody on the team to make sure that we are looking at those stores and making the best decisions possible. I would also say you're doing a disservice to yourself if you're not communicating regularly to your organization. I put out daily market recap emails that tell the folks, hey, what's happening with spot prices today? What's going on in the markets? What do I think's happening with competitor retails and what might be happening over the short term as far as what I see as trends and where we need to be going. I also like to communicate weekly on a recap of what's been happening. How are volumes and margins performing? What's happening in the spot price or in the trading markets that might be driving margins in a certain direction? I also believe you've got to ask a lot of questions if you're in the pricing seat. That's really important to get input, seek the input, and use the input coming from your field teams, from your operations teams, to make sure that collaboratively we're making the best decisions that we absolutely can. When you talk about knowing strengths and weaknesses, it's really against competition. You might have one trade area where you're the bomb. You are the destination stop in that area. You might have the exact same format and offer in a different trade area, and you're not the destination stop because one of your competitors has got a better offer than you. And this is where a lot of the art comes into pricing, where we're looking at benchmarking specific attributes of stores. How is my traffic pattern? What kind of location do I have here? Am I on the away corner? Am I on the near corner? Is my traffic pattern more on the way to work or on the way home from work? Typically, we love to be on the way home from work on an away corner. That is typically the best performing corner of an intersection, but not all of your stores are going to fit into that mold. So you need to know where your traffic pattern is better than your competitor and where they have you over a barrel. You know, look at other key attributes of your store. How many fueling positions do you have? What is the size of the C-store offer? What is your food offer? Do you have made to order, healthy selections? And then how does your competition stack up in all those same areas? You know, I put a lot of credence on number of parking spaces. And if you look at a lot of leading marketers out there, they obviously do too, because you see new builds out there with nowadays 60, 70, sometimes 80 different parking spaces on the lot. And that's big to customers, and it certainly helps make you more of a destination stop. But how's your ingress egress? You know, how is access into your lot better or worse than your competitors? What's the strength of your brand? How do you quantify the brand value that you offer your customers? And we do that through something called the value proposition, or what is it that drives customers to come visit you? You know, if you don't have this information about you and all of your competitors, I recommend get it, right? When you do these market rides, you take notes, you find out where competitors have strengths that are your weaknesses, where do you have strengths that are their weaknesses, and then how does that factor into pricing strategy corner by corner, not only across an entire brand or across a network, but we're talking about corner by corner strategies here. There are companies out there that offer this information. If you don't have it, you don't have the bandwidth to drive around and capture all this information, go to a company and buy some data so that you have this information at your disposal when you're trying to analyze and determine pricing strategy. You know, in the area of science, we talk about, you know, what's the right combination of art versus science in the pricing discipline. And I truly believe it's a 50-50 kind of proposition. The reason why I say that is because there's really no other area of the company, and most companies, that have more data at their disposal than in the fuel pricing area. And I think it's really important, to my third point, you know, use that data to help tell the story of what's going on for your fuel performance. You know, if you're not a data junkie and you're in a pricing seat, you know, to be blunt about it, you're probably not in the right role. There's so much data, gigabytes of data available to us, and I do believe that pricing managers at their core have some element of data junkie in their blood. And this is really important this year. You know, we will go down. 2020 will absolutely go down as the year of COVID. I don't think anybody would dispute that. We didn't see this coming a year ago, but what it's done is it's thrown the industry into a tizzy. Absolutely it has. And why do I say that? Historically, the industry is what we call very rateable. And if nothing else, you had your performance versus last year to benchmark how you're doing. This year, we just don't have that. That's not an option. If you look at your performance versus last year, it probably makes you a little sick to your stomach. But keep in mind that you might be in a market where if you're down 10% versus last year for volume, you may not be doing well enough. You might be in another market, you're down 20%, but you're beating the competition for what that market is offering on demand right now. So I'm real big about don't chase the phantom gallons. And we know that we can't do that this year if all we do is chase phantom gallons and we bleed out margin. At the end of the day, we're not going to make our profitability goals. So I encourage you to say, how am I looking at my performance? Am I getting market share data from somebody? Am I looking at Opus industry trends and saying, okay, here's how we think we're doing in this relative market, and that feels okay, or it doesn't feel okay. But by all means, we can't go chasing the phantom gallons, or we're going to end up damaging the overall profitability of the industry. I think it's really important to use your data to communicate your price position versus your overall strategy. And I like to use the data to tell the story, because what it does is it deflects some of the discussion away from where is all the volume. The volume is just not there. But we can at least look at things like how's our price position versus where we've historically been set. And we can use that information to help tell the story about what's going on. Monthly, weekly data charts, very, very important. Utilizing your market share to help you understand where you stack up, very, very important. This chart here kind of tells a little bit of the story about what I would call pricing lanes, or where am I stacked up versus the other types of competitors in a marketplace. And if you look at the chart, there's kind of a natural lane that everybody fits into, and this ties in with your strategy. Know what you want to be when you grow up. Where do we want to position ourselves? And to get there, I'm using all of those strengths and weaknesses versus my competition to say, hey, this is how we should be priced in this area. But if we communicate our data, if we use the data to help tell the story, I think you're going to find that you'll have a much more all-inclusive discussion across the organization. You'll be much more informed, and then together as a team, you're going to make better decisions around what our strategy should be and how we should be performing. So with that, I will look at another chart here where we talk at, let's look at margins. How are we stacked up on margin this year versus last year? In most markets across the US, margins this year are significantly better than they were last year. I view that as a very positive trend, because what's happening is, for the most part, marketers and convenience store operators out there, we're viewing the fact that if volume is not there, we need to be pricing to something bigger. And that could be gross profit. That could be, what's my overall petroleum gross margin in the fuel space, and use that as your guiding North Star to say, hey, if I'm not getting the volume because COVID and lockdowns and other things that come out of this pandemic, I can at least make sure that I'm achieving what I should be achieving as far as overall gross profitability for the organization. Here's a chart from Price Advantage, kind of shows you how you're positioned versus competition, how are volumes doing versus your target, where are costs. Using this information, communicating it out to your organization so that you're making those all-inclusive decisions and you're communicating exactly what's happening in the fuel space. It's critical when it comes to teamwork makes the dream work. And that's kind of where I would leave you with that. So with that, I will turn that back over to Allison.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Scott. This last slide again is just from Price Advantage, doing a volume and price analysis. And Scott, I do have a couple of questions for you. One, you talk about if a person doesn't like data, then they might not want to be in a fuel pricing role. One change that we have seen over the past, I would say 3 years, is that a number of our customers, when they are looking for someone to take on a fuel pricing role, many of them are not actually searching for an experienced fuel pricer. They are looking for, a lot of times it's a recent grad, or it can be, a legacy employee, but someone who loves data, someone who, really likes Excel or wants to get into data science. Have you seen that with the people that you've worked with as well?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. We are at the Wells Group. We're a Power BI shop. If you don't have an analytics module of some sort, I recommend you get one, because it is so much easier to crunch that data and utilize the data if it's sitting in a warehouse of some sort. When I look at what makes fuel pricing analysts and fuel pricing managers successful, it is the ability to get into that data and use the data to tell the story. And that can be tedious, right? And I've got workbooks with more than 1 million rows of data sitting in Excel, and it's just necessary to make sure that if you don't enjoy getting into the data and crunching numbers and telling the story using the data, you've got to get in that space, because it'll make you much more successful as you go forward.
Perfect. Well, what we're going to do next is I'm going to have John. We're talking about data, what's going on. So now we are going to take a quick look at what data you can see within Price Advantage. and how that data is imported, displayed, and how you can view the data there and price advantage.
Thanks, Allison. Scott just talked about using store attributes to help you decide where are your competitive advantages. And here we've got a screen that shows different store attributes for each location. For example, I can see those locations that have car washes, those that have electronic signs, and I can see how many fueling stations I have at each site. I can also see which stores are new to industry. I've got additional columns I can choose from. Every person can decide what they want to see on this screen. So if I wanted to, for example, show month-to-date volume for all my gasoline, I can do that. I can go down here and pick replacement margin, so I can drag and drop that over here. And if I wanted to, I could go up to the G's and pick gross profit, and I can move that over here. And depending on how you like to see the screen, you can rearrange this. You can hide or display what columns you want to see. Let's close that. I can also go over here to my quick search. Right now I'm seeing all stores in the southern region. That's 55 stores. If I wanted to see just those that have a car wash, all I have to do is click car wash for the parameter. And now I'm going to see 18 stores. So if I click on this, save and search, now I'm seeing 18 stores in the southern region that have car washes. Let's double click now and drill down to store 120 and talk about strategies. We covered attributes, now let's talk about strategies. If I click on the strategies button here, I can see this store pricing strategy is to match this particular Valero, but I want to have guardrails, so I want to be between 2 cents above and 2 cents below that Valero and the Wawa. But I also want to take into account my replacement cost. I want to be at least in this case, 19 cents replacement margin. That's 19 cents above the replacement cost. Now suppose, given today's margins, I want to have a better replacement margin during this time. I'm going to go ahead and go to the value here, pick 25, and now when I click Save and Close, the proposed price is 25 cents above the replacement cost of the store. So if I were to click and run now just to show how this evaluating strategies works. Once the evaluation is done, I'll be able to go to the fuel pricing view again and see that orange cell that represents that proposed price. And when I hover over it, I can see the details besides that proposed price, including that bottom one there. See, it says proposed price greater than or equal to 25 cents above the replacement cost of the store, not met. So that's telling the story, if I were to match the Valero, I would not be achieving my minimum replacement margin of 25 cents. There's lots more to show in this screen, but we just wanted to cover the main points that help us talk about the best practices that we're discussing in today's webinar.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. And now we are moving on to our third presenter. Our third presenter is Nick Perry. Nick is with the Spinks group out of, well, what do you call your region? I don't want to list all the states, but tell us a little bit about where you operate, the states that you're operating in, and sort of your role, because you grew up in this industry, right, Nick?
I did. So we're primarily, you can just say South Carolina, in the upstate, and then down in Charleston, South Carolina. We obviously, I have a dealer network, in the North Carolina area, but primarily I'd say South Carolina. But yes, I did. I grew up in this industry, and my dad owned some convenience stores as I was growing up, going through college. Graduated college and got into the grocery wholesale side of it for about 10 years. And then from there, I went and worked with a chain out of Charlotte doing the inside the sales box, and then ended up landing over here at Spinks. They recruited me back in 2015 to take over the fuel side of it. So today's topic that I'd like to cover is just the complexity of a price change or the simplicity of price changing. So back 27 years ago, when I would change a fuel price, it was you get a bill lading from your supplier, and depending on what your margins were, you take out your pole sign. I'm sure we all know what that is, and stick up your, dip it in water, put your sign up on the price up on the sign, and kind of carry on. Through technology, and we've all heard about the data that is out there now in data mining and being able to make a more educated decision based on attributes of your store, traffic flow, where you sit, what your offering is versus your competitor, so on and so forth. Using price advantage, executing a price change is very simple. One of my biggest, I guess, pet peeves of it is sitting in this chair and in this seat and having all this data. I would say I would have the most knowledge to make the correct decision for a fuel price change. So I shouldn't have to call a store manager, text the store manager or store associate to change. I mean, we all know about, especially turnover in this industry, and properly training the store associates. And, if you have to call, you may you see on the slide, I'm busy right now, or they don't have their phone on, and it could be a Friday afternoon and you need to execute that price change. Well, through price advantage, you saw on John's previous slide the orange where he hovered and saw that his strategy was met. It is literally as simple as clicking that proposed price, hitting a checkbox, and hit send. And it goes straight to the store POS. It changes your fuel controller, which changes your dispensers, and then will change your sign. And you have a check and balance system. Our signs are integrated through Price Advantage, where I can see that the price sign did get changed, the dispensers did get changed, or for whatever reason, I may get a late price change notification where could be various different reasons. A pump was hung up or a transaction was stuck and the price didn't change. And what that does is allows you to, number one, identify the issue and fix it, but it alerts the teammates. It'll alert the territory manager, the market manager. I'll get a copy of it, and we can kind of see it through to the finish. But the days of calling and texting, and it's over. The data's there, the technology's there. With Price Advantage, we could literally do it on our phones. The technology's there. There's no reason not to utilize it, especially in the year of 2020, where you've heard in this presentation, data is king and margin is king. To utilize the tools that are necessary to keep margin at king.
Nick, one thing that we hear a lot of is we hear retailers say, and you mentioned this earlier, that you might have over the weekend, you might have a teenage person in there who's busy, who might not even, if a price change comes in over the weekend and it's a manual process, they might not even know how to do it or care to do it. Or it might be during the week that a price change is sent on Monday, and the person who is responsible for making that price change is with a customer. They're doing a couple of other things. So they're like in their head, I'll get back to that, in 15 minutes and change the price. And they forget. And so the price hasn't changed for maybe 2 days, and you as the person who should, who's in charge of those prices, you might not even know that 2 days has lapsed since there was a price change. And then you could lose a lot in those 2 days.
Oh, absolutely. That is, again, that goes back to the turnover and training. It's a tough industry. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody, but properly being trained, if you're having to manually change, we use Radiant. It's not an easy process to get in there and change the fuel controller. And if you're on a weekend and you've got, your third tier person running the store, they may just not do it to no fault of their own. They just hadn't been trained. And here you come in the next day and you see volumes, and it's like, man, what happened? And, you know, you after research and looking around, you start looking, it's like, oh, well, my retail has never changed, and I got, you know, the superior competitor across the street a nickel below me. It makes all the sense in the world at that point. So
Right.
being able to, again, I all of us fuel pricing, fuel directors out there in the world that have all this data right in front of us, that are able to make that educated decision based on the data that's fed into Price Advantage, put in front of you. We are the experts. When I decide to send a price to a location, I want it to be immediate. I don't want it to be in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I'm sending it because I want to send it now, and there's reasons for balancing margin, gallons, and inside sales. I mean, it gets down to, I think Carter was talking about, you know, days of the week. You know, Fridays are pretty big days for inside sales. So I need to be, my price needs to be sharp. I can't rely on someone that wasn't trained inside the store to not know how to change the fuel price. And then you wake up Saturday morning and, you know, the Friday's done and gone. There's nothing you can do about it. So being able to communicate straight to the point of sale, to the fuel controller that changes the dispensers, to changing your sign in a seamless transaction. I think John's going to show you in a matter of 2 or 3 clicks of a mouse. It's a pretty big deal.
Right, and that's a perfect segue. I'm going to make John Keller the presenter right now, and John is actually going to show us what Nick has just talked about. We've talked about manage by exception and these price changes, and that's what John is real quickly going to walk you through. We're at 9:52, so we do have about 10 minutes left. This John's demo takes about a minute and a half, and then we can open it up to questions from anyone who's on the webinar.
Thanks, Allison. What we're looking at here is the proposed prices view, which allows you to manage by exception. We've got all these different strategies that have proposed prices for different commodities. There's a number of different columns here. We won't go through each one. What we want to show here is that I've got this notion of strategies where all the criteria are met, and then a couple strategies where the criteria is not met. So what I'm going to do here is just click on the select criteria met, and when I do that, all these boxes are checked for criteria met, and I can click the send now button, accept that, and then all those price changes are sent to the stores, leaving me with 2 stores that I can now evaluate to decide what do I want to do with these locations. If I hover over this, I can see what's going on with this strategy. This is the one we talked about earlier where I wanted to match the Valero, be plus or minus the Wawa and the Valero, but I've got the proposed price where I'm not hitting my 25-cent minimum replacement margin. If I double click, I'm looking now at the fuel pricing view. We saw this earlier as well. If I click on this cell, I can launch my proposed prices view. Notice that I've got my commodity spread set up here. So let's say I don't want to go with the proposed price. Instead, I want to go with 314. Automatically, that price is set for unleaded, mid, and premium. I can click the Send Now button, and now I see a new row here that's the pending price, and this is connected to my point of sale and to my signs. I can track the signs as they move. I can also see, these are skyline signs showing temperature and size of the digits. We can also work with non-skyline signs, but of course, if you have the skyline sign, you get the benefit of the complete round trip price change confirmation, displaying that those digits have actually changed. And when that yellow row disappears, we'll know that that price change has completed, and that price change will be finished on the sign as well. Back to the skyline signs, if there's a segment out or something on your LED, you'll be able to see that in Price Advantage. And this is even available in your mobile device, so you can be on the road somewhere and see. There, we just saw that sign update with the new prices that have just completed, and now that yellow row is gone, so that price change is finished. And that's it for this part of the webinar.
Thank you. I am going to unmute the participant panel, and this would allow you to chime in and ask any questions you may have. with a group. We've got about 60 people online right now, and so there is the risk that you might ask over someone else. But if you would, you could raise your hand in the application and then voice your question. You are currently unmuted. Does anyone on the line have any questions for John or Nick or Scott? As I mentioned, Carter's was pre-recorded, so he's not with us actually at this time. We did have one question typed in, and it was if a person has 3 stores and they're competing with 3 major chains, how do these concepts apply? Because with 3 stores, they might not be a viable person to purchase a lot of software, but there may be some strategies that they could apply to this. Would anyone like to answer that?
I think part of the answer is how far away do you sit from your competitor locations? And that is a twofold question. In other words, your office may not be anywhere near those competitors, and yet they have a tremendous impact on your gallons sold. You also may not want to be tied to your desk. You may want to be off out and about on the golf course, on the ski resort, and you want to be able to have access to see what's going on in your market and make price changes in response to those competitors. So if you're not constantly watching what the competitors are doing, if you've got a lot of gallons that are going through your locations and a lot of money to be made and a lot of margin that is at risk or gallons that are at risk, it doesn't matter if you're even at 3 locations. The concepts still apply.
John, this is Nick. I think I'd add too that through price advantage, if this is a major competitor, you can learn and track how they react to what you do and be a little bit more nimble using price advantage. If I do this, they're going to do that. Or learn what their tendencies are and when they price. And again, the data part is king, and find that balance of what works. Having 3 stores makes you pretty nimble and can react pretty quick. So I think if you had the data there to analyze it and you know, run a 30, 60, 90-day test with a different strategy, did it prove a better bottom line for you? So that's what I would say for someone that has 3 stores.
If you do have a follow-up question or would like to learn more or have something forwarded to our speakers, or if you would like to take a deep dive into a price advantage demo, feel free to email me at allisonrowe@skylineproducts.com.